Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Wingecarribee Shire Council on Wednesday the 16th of November. Firstly, if I could apologise for the late start. The statements by residents went a bit longer than normal, but I thought it was important that they be heard. They are very important matters that are coming before the Council. Acknowledgement of country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledge the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respects to elders both past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here or watching today. Statement of ethical obligations. As Administrator, I will undertake the duties of the Office of Administrator in the best interests of the people of the Wingecarribee Shire Council area and to act faithfully and impartially carry out the functions, powers, authorities and discretions vested in me under the Local Government Act 1993 or any other act to the best of my ability and judgment. I am committed to the declaration of conflicts of interest in relation to items listed for consideration on the agenda or which are considered at this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct and the Code of Meeting Practice. Obviously, there's no apologies. Next item is the adoption of minutes of the previous meeting. I would move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on Wednesday 19 October be adopted as a true and correct record of the proceedings of the meeting and declare that carried. General Manager, declarations of interest.
Thank you, Mr. May. There are no declarations of interest.
Thank you. There are no administrator minutes. The first item listed for consideration is item 8.1, the Bowral Town Centre Master Plan. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Executive Manager, Strategic Outcomes, Mr. Park, will speak to this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, this report provides an overview of the proposed Bowral Town Centre Master Plan, an update to Council and the community, and an overview of the project brief to complete the master planning project. Mr. May, the Bowral Town Centre Master Plan is a critically important strategic planning project that will guide both public and private investment, shape the future of the Bowral Town Centre and support a vibrant and livable centre for the local community. The master plan is intended to directly inform Council's capital works program as well as amendments to the LEP and DCP to ensure that the planning framework supports the community's vision and delivers development outcomes consistent with the community's expectations. As outlined in the report, the master plan is intended to be developed through a collaborative process to ensure that the plan is, owned collectively by Council, community and the industry. And the report seeks Council endorsement of the project brief so that we can progress this critically important strategic project.
Thank you. I've got one question in relation to this matter. The handbrake that car parking is putting on potential development in the commercial area of Bowral, there was a report done that there was not going to be another report to Council as an interim measure. When's that likely to be presented?
That report will come before Council in December.
Thank you. In relation to item 8.1, the Bowral Town Centre Master Plan, I would move the Officer's recommendation as outlined on page 8 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. We now move to the presentation of the audited financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2022. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Kuzmanowski, will introduce this item, and we also have our auditors with us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to advise Council that the 21-22 financial statements have been audited and ready for adoption. The financial statements have been prepared in accordance with the Australian Accounting Standards and the Code of Accounting Practice issued by the Office of Local Government and were presented to the Audit Office in September for audit. To recap the financial results, an operating surplus of $29.4 million for the period 1 July 2021 to 30 June 2022 was achieved, which was approximately $3 million above the original budget estimate. Excluding all capital revenue and asset revaluation amounts, Council's operating surplus with these exclusions is $11.3 million, as reflected in Council's consolidated operating performance ratio. As a result of the audit, 2 material non-cash adjustments were made relating to asset revaluations. A revaluation relating to council land revaluation of $47.5 million was required to be adjusted in the financial statements. This write-up was a non-cash write-up to reflect the movement in land value that had accumulated since the land was last revalued 3 years ago. A second revalue increment adjustment was also made relating to infrastructure assets of a total of $35 million. This write-up was a non-cash write-up to reflect the adjusted methodology in desktop revaluations requested by the Audit Office. Further details of these adjustments are contained in the report. Council's unrestricted working capital position at 30 June 2022 is $6.48 million. This is $1.48 million above the Council Resolve benchmark of $5 million. The surplus was attributable to a combination of one-off revenue amounts received during the year and minor savings in operating expenditure. It is recommended that the financial statements and independent auditors' reports are adopted by Council. I'll hand over to the Audit Office, Michael Kazu, to give his presentation.
As I understand it, prior to the Audit Office giving a presentation, we've got to move suspension of standing orders. I would move that standing orders be suspended in order for the Director, Financial Audit Services, Mr. Michael Kazu, to address Council on item 9.1, presentation of the audited financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2022, and declare that carried. It's a procedure we've got to follow. Take the chair.
Okay, thanks. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for giving us this opportunity for us to present our findings for the 2021-22 external audit. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Kazu. I'm a Director in the Financial Audit Branch of the New South Wales Audit Office. I'm also the Engagement Controller for the External Audit of Wingecarribee Shire Council. With me today is Moaz Juned, who's the Engagement Manager for the audit, and he'll be also presenting the results for this afternoon. So I guess in summary today, our main area that we want to focus on is the report on the conduct of the audit, which outlines the key findings from the audit, or the results of the audit, but also some of the key information in the financial statements, along with some analysis, and also some of the key ratios that need to be disclosed in the financial statements. Like every year, we had some challenges in the audit, and I think there's no audit that there is no challenges. There's always something to work through, and I think a lot of them have already been discussed around the fair value adjustments that are required in the financial statements. But overall, I think it was a good, smooth audit process, given the circumstances. And yeah, I'd just like to thank Pav and Damien and the team for their cooperation, courtesy and professionalism throughout the process. I'll now pass it over to Moaz, who will share some of the key information in the financial statements and some analysis.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, everyone. If you could move on to the next slide.
It might be easy to change chairs. So there's a lot of people watching
Sure.
on webcast, I would imagine, having to go on this business page.
Sure. Thank you once again. Basically, we have done 3 audits during the year that covered general purpose financial statements, special purpose financial statements, and a special schedule for permissible income. I will now cover some of the details of the income statement in the next slide. Right, as we can see, there has been a slight drop in the operating results. mainly because of the provision of Welby for the landfill that was done during the year. There was a significant increase in the provision during the year, specifically due to some additional information that was made available from the EPA during the year that made us recognize this additional information. There was an external consultant hired to assess the provision, and this has resulted in a 13 million increase. This was slightly offset by the grants income during the year. Grants income were majorly coming in from the financial assistance grant, storm and disaster recovery program that was provided by the Office of the Local Government. And there was an EPA agreement signed for the bushfire green waste cleanup program. And the increase in the rates and revenue is the normal increase with the rate peg and the increase in the rateable properties. Can we move to the next slide? In terms of the cash flow, we can see a significant increase in the operating cash flows. That is due to the increase in grant income that was earned during the year. With the investing cash flows, this was basically just the reinvestment of some of the term deposits. There were redemption of term deposits, and then these were reinvested. And there was also an increase in the property, plant, and equipment. The increase in property, plant, and equipment is majorly from the roads assets and also from the work in progress. There was some additional operating lands purchased during the year by the council. Majorly, these were the 51 Mittagong Street and the Elsmore Street land. With the financing cash flow, there was a slight decrease. This is nothing but the normal repayment of the loans. There were no new loans taken by the council. Can we move to the next slide? In terms of the cash and the investments, in total, we had a 204 million balance at the end of 30th June 2022. We have externally restricted balance out of this of 163, which is slightly higher than 2021. The increase is about 10.5 million. It comes from 5.5 million in the sewerage fund and 5 million in the specific general fund unexpended grants. With the internal allocations, these are the allocations that are made by the council resolution. You can see that there is a drop of 3.4 million. And also considering the fact that the unrestricted balance has increased by 5.1 million, there was an internal resolution passed wherein the balance from the internal allocations were passed on to the unrestricted balance so that the liquidity needs of the council are met. Next slide, please. Do you want?
Okay, so I'll just cover the ratios, and as you can see there in the slides, these are the ratios that there's obviously other ratios, but these are the ratios that we're going to focus on today. They were the ratios that were included as part of the audited financial statements. So in summary, there's 6 ratios. These ratios are common across the sector, and the benchmarks are provided by the Office of Local Government. And as you'll see from my slide, each of council's ratios were exceeded the Office of Local Government's benchmark, which is a good result. I'll go through some of these ratios just in summary, just to give you a bit of an understanding of what they mean. So the first one is the operating performance ratio. This ratio indicates council's ability to contain expenditure within the revenue that was generated. The benchmark set by the Office of Local Government needs to be greater than 0%, so effectively that means to be breaking even. The benchmark, the Wingecarribee Shire Council's ratio was 8.3%, which exceeded the benchmark. The next ratio is the own source operating revenue ratio. This ratio looks at how dependent council are on external grants. The benchmark set by the Office of Local Government is 60%, and Wingecarribee Shire Council's ratio is 66.7%. So what that effectively means is 2/3 of council's revenue that comes in has been internally generated, and obviously 1/3 of that is coming through from external grants mainly state and Commonwealth government grants. The next ratio is the unrestricted current ratio. So this ratio is focused on looking at council's ability to meet short-term obligations, so the liquidity of council. The benchmark set by the Office of Local Government is 1.5 times, and council's ratio there is 4.3 times. So what that means is you could look at it as for every $4 of council assets, there's $1 of liabilities that need to be met in the short term. The next ratio is the debt service cover ratio. This ratio looks at, it indicates how much money has been generated to service the debt requirements or to service the debt of council. The OLG benchmark is greater than 2 times. For Wingecarribee Shire Council, that ratio was 10.5 times. So that means that council generated 10 times more cash than the requirement to service debt. Fifth ratio, there's the rates and annual charges outstanding percentage, and this indicates council's ability to recover money owed by ratepayers. The benchmark set by the Office of Local Government is less than 10% for rural and regional councils, and the councils were within that benchmark, were within that of 5%. So effectively what that means is 95% of the debt owed by ratepayers was able to be recovered as of 30 June 2022. Final ratio is the cash expense cover ratio, and this is looking at how long, based on the cash and investments available, how long could council continue meeting their obligations without any money coming in. And the ratio, the benchmark set by OLG is greater than 3 months. As you can see there in the slides in our presentation, Wingecarribee Shire Council is at 23.8 months. It's important to note with these ratios that, first for this one here, 23.8 months, it means that you're able to theoretically continue paying operating and financing obligations, not to continue renewing assets. So, yeah, and a lot of these slides here, while they're very important and they're important for people to understand, I think they also need to be looked at council by council, especially when looking at the benchmarks, and while you can be exceeding certain benchmarks, from council to council that could mean different things, and also needs to be looked at over multiple years because there could be one-off things that are impacting ratios. But yeah, okay, could we please move to the next slide? So each year our office table a report to Parliament, and it covers our audit results for each year's audits, and also some of the insights that we've been able to generate across the sector. And that report is usually tabled early the year after the audit, so early the next calendar year. On top, as well as that, we also table some performance audits, which is a little bit different, but it's performed by a different branch within our office. And that covers more, it's probably more of a deep dive into specific focus areas, and it might not include every council. There might be a couple of councils selected that get included as part of that audit. Can we please move to the next slide? And I just thought it'd be worth just having there as part of the presentation our annual works program moving forward, which gives an indication of what type of audits are going to be coming up in our performance audit branch. You'll see there coming up in this financial year is an audit on cybersecurity in local government, another one on effectiveness of financial management and governance, and also a performance audit on coastal and management reforms. And in future years there, we've also got some future audits that will be coming up, and I guess the flavour you can see there's probably that a lot of them are going to be around integrity, governance and value for money. I think that's all we had to present to you today, but happy to take any questions.
Might as well get my money's worth while you're here. Look, I've got 4 questions. I note that quite a few councils are having conditioned audits by virtue of the Red Fleet recommendations. We have complied with the Auditor's Office requirements in relation to accounting for RFS assets.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Is there a benchmark or a ratio for, or a yardstick from the Audit Office or OLG in relation to borrowings? Not the repayment, but what is a good amount for a council to have borrowed? Is there a... Look, only because of intergenerational debt, and you won't be here, but later on in the business paper, I have a different view to the council officers in relation to how we fund some major assets which are going to last many years. Is there a yardstick for that, or...?
Not that I'm aware of. Like, as you'll see in some of those ratios, there is a focus on debt, and it's mainly focused on council's ability to meet those debt requirements. But in terms of how much should be borrowed or what type of arrangement should be put in place, I think there is no ratio or yardstick, and it's probably because it'll depend on council to council, different circumstances. It'd be hard to give a definitive.
Yeah.
ratio.
I noted you made reference to grants. Earlier on, the staff advised council that there'd been an increase in grants received by this council in the last financial year, in effect contested grants. Is that what you were saying when you made your presentation as well?
That there was an increase in grants
Yes.
contributions? Yes, that's correct. I think my colleague Moaz, that's what he was touching on, that there was an increase in grants.
Well,
In
you know, that
2021.
debunks some of the nonsense that's been going on in this community about the council hasn't been getting as many grants as they used to. The independent auditors from the Audit Office can confirm that's incorrect.
Based on the last 2 years, the grants have increased from the previous year.
Thank you very much. And my final question is Welby Tip. You mentioned, and is it? I think it's 13 million.
Yes, an increase of 13 million.
What disappoints me is this council has known for years of its problems with Welby Tip, but has never really done anything about it or brought it to account. So what's happened in the last financial year is as a result of the independent advice the council's got to remediate that problem, that's now been brought to account in these accounts.
Yeah, so I've been on the audit, this is my third year responsible for the audit, and over the last couple of years, I think it was maybe 3 years ago, there was an independent consultant who came in and gave a estimate of what the costs would be. That was the best information that was available at the time, and I think last year no information had changed based on from our discussions with council. From what we can see, there was not necessarily an error in the previous years. Well, there wasn't. That was based on what was available at the time. Upon more discussions and with the EPA, and based on discussions also with the consultant, it has been a significant increase. On whether or not they should have gone earlier or not, we're not in a position really.
Yeah, no, I'm not expecting that, but it's a lot of money, and it's beyond the financial capabilities of this council to address the issue, and it is a major issue. And no doubt the general manager and the staff will be raising it with the state, I would hope, to try and get us some help, because it's something that the council's inherited, but many councils have. But not many councils have the water problems for Sydney catchment that we do.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, thanks very much for coming along tonight. If you want to leave, feel free. And I was pleased to hear your complimentary remarks about Pav and Damien. I agree with you.
Thank you.
They do a great job. Okay,
Thanks, Evan.
I would now move that we return to open council and declare that carried. And in relation to 9.1, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 23 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. We now move on to the annual report. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Today, our annual report for the 21-22 financial year will be tabled, and I believe you, thank you, have a copy. It is a statutory document which we are required to prepare each year and it needs to be submitted to Council, to the OLG, thank you, Manager Assets, to the OLG by the 30th of November each year. It does require and contain statutory information around statistics and financials and the end of financial report as outlined by our auditors. It also provides the opportunity to bring together an overview into one document the previous 12 months. It's an opportunity to reflect on the year, an opportunity to share with our community our performance over that year, and an opportunity to put in context the events our community have faced and to share what was achieved by the team at Council with and for our community. I'd like to take a few minutes to provide an overview of the last 12 months, that is 1 July to 30 June, and have a short presentation. Next slide. In terms of our community, as of 2021 ABS, we have just over 52,000 residents in our community. And the difference between the 2016 to the 21 ABS was growth of around about 2,000 people in the 70 to 84-year-old age group, around 775 people in the 25 to 34-year-old age group, with older workers and pre-retirees, the 50 to 59-year-olds, around 450 people, and an increase in around about 350 people who are parents and home builders. And why this is important is as we refresh our operational plan and look at our services moving forward, the demography of our area will inform that. Next slide. In terms of our organisation, approximately 65% of our workforce are also residents. So not only do they work for Council and serve our community, but they're also residents and recipients of the services that Council provides. We currently have a full-time effective or a full-time equivalent staffing of around 478. Our services, we operate 24/7. So we operate what you see when you come into the Council chambers, at the customer service area, but we also operate water and sewer 24/7, so when people turn on their taps they actually have water and good quality potable water. The sale yards, the RRC, our swimming pools and our libraries. We have an annual operating budget of approximately 148 million. Next slide. The last 12 months have had many challenges. Next slide. We've had COVID in the last 12 months, and it's easy to forget what we actually, as a community, endured as an organisation. We had 104, just under a quarter of our staff working from home. In that time, we also had just under half of our staff impacted by COVID. Next slide. But we continued to provide services in different ways. We provided the koala karaoke as part of the overall koala conservation project, ran tulip time virtually, changed our service delivery models for libraries, and then were heavily involved in the recovery, economic recovery with the visitor economy group through the lifestyle edit. Next slide. We also, in the last 12 months, supported and worked through the public inquiry. It commenced in September 21 and it was concluded in July 2022 when the Minister announced the outcome. In that 9-month period, there were a number of hearings. Over 25,000 documents were provided via summons to the inquiry, and many staff within the organisation were involved in both the administration and supporting the public inquiry, as well as sourcing the information requested. Next slide. We've also endured 2 severe weather storm events. We've had a mini tornado and we've had a lot of flooding, and as you can see, that has had major impacts on our infrastructure. Next slide. And we've also worked to recruit, so attract and retain staff in one of Australia's most difficult skill environments. We're not the only industry trying to recruit. It's across the board, and we've worked within that current environment. Through that, we've managed, the team as a whole have managed incredibly well to continue to deliver, and I'd like just to go through some of those highlights. So with our operational plan, each year we adopt a budget and an operational plan, and that aligns to the community strategic plan and the delivery plan. We've completed approximately 96% of all the actions we set out to do 1st of July 2021. We reduced the revotes, the capital works projects that were carried over from one year to another. We've reduced that by 50% against the previous year. And we've also secured an additional $13 million on previous year in terms of contestable grants. So these aren't the annual grants that we receive through financial assistance. These are grants that the staff, the team here, have actively pursued and have put in applications for and have competitively achieved. Next slide. We've also continued with a lot of customer service requests face-to-face. Over 18,000 transactions have occurred at the Civic Centre over the customer service counter. Our web page hits over 2.6 million. We've also worked to reduce our call wait time, and also looking at being efficient where we can, answering calls on first contact. Thank you. We've also had a major focus on re-engaging with our community. We understand that this is not something that will happen quickly or overnight, but it is something that we are heavily focused on. In the last 6 months, we had the listening tours where we visited 16 villages and towns across our shire between March and May, with over 230 attendees. And also undertook in the 12-month period, this isn't all of the consultation, but this is a summary of the consultation that we've undertaken over the 12 months, which is focused on policies, a lot of major policy changes around the governance, transparency, improving how we provide information and the way in which we work with our community. We've undertaken significant consultation around our capital works and our renewal works, as well as our projects such as the Robertson Village Place Plan. In terms of strategic outcomes and the refocus on our future, there has been significant work over the last 12 months on our strategic work. The local housing strategy was adopted in July, August last year, and flowing from that we've worked and engaged in terms of a community and recreational facilities strategy. We've allocated money to undertake the integrated transport strategy and commissioned the medium and low-rise density controls, which will feed into the review of the LEP and the DCPs. Thank you. We've also undertaken significant capital works. Apart from the emergency works that the teams have had to undertake as a result of the severe weather events and storm events, we've also prepared designs for Old South Road and tendered, and those works will now commence in this financial year. Significant work with our water and sewer networks, significant work with road reconstruction, whilst we've also been maintaining the roads. We've also, and with road maintenance, 4,000, thanks Michelle. Over 4,000 requests for roads maintenance have been requested over the last 12 months. I should say too, with our water, that we've taken over 4,500 samplings of drinking water and had over 99% compliance, and planted over 200 street trees in the last 12 months. We've also responded to 125 footpath requests and 750 building maintenance requests on top of the 4,000 requests for the roads. In terms of the environment, a lot of work has been undertaken with the Koala Conservation Project, with the team securing $600,000 over a 4-year period to continue that work. A major project around reducing roadkill, as well as significant work around our local flora and fauna. Thank you. We've also worked with community groups. Michelle, go back. And planted over 2,000 rehabilitation trees have been planted. Bush care across 59 reserves, covering approximately 3,000 hectares. Thanks, Michelle. We've also been progressing major works. Bowral Memorial Hall has been a mammoth project and will deliver a state-of-the-art facility once open early in 2023. And it will be something that the community will be very proud of. Thank you, Michelle. We've also been continuing work at the Livestock Exchange, updating access to the facility, CCTV, the weighbridge, as well as works in the livestock yards. Significant work has been undertaken in relation to the new animal shelter in the SES facility. The designs have been prepared in consultation with both the SES for their component as well as the volunteers at the animal shelter and staff. The DA has been submitted and it's intended that we start construction early in the new year, or tender in the new year, I should say. Significant work also has been undertaken on our water and sewer networks, with planning underway for major upgrades as well as works at Werribee and Bundanoon. In the governance and risk space, we've been responding to the series of reviews that were done over the last 12 months and the recommendations that fall out of that, as well as looking at how we improve transparency and communication and governance and accountability. We established an Audit Risk and Improvement Committee at the last meeting. The chair of that committee addressed council. That committee has been formed under the OLG's guidelines, and we're working towards the proposed changes through the ARIC. We established the Professional Conduct Coordinator, which in essence is an internal ombudsman to manage complaints by either external parties or where there's staff who may have complaints that would like to go to someone independent of council to have those heard. We've undertaken a significant program of policy reviews and updates around financial reserves, cash investments, complaints dealing with unreasonable complainants, councillor and staff interactions, procurement. Thank you. We've also had a continued focus on improving DA timeframes. This is going to take us some time, however, over the last 6 months we've made significant inroads in terms of improved information on the website, improved DA information online, updating and enhancing our e-tracker, introducing an online duty planner booking system, as well as moving to a portal management team. Thank you, Michelle. We've also undertaken a series of plans of management, such as the Renwick Plan of Management, which has enabled the new cafe to be included within that space, and the operator will be up and going early in the new year. Thanks, Michelle. I'd like, if you don't mind, Mr. May, just to share, that's our program for the last 12 months, but just to share the program that we have ahead of us in 2022-23, and on today's paper there is a quarterly update. I know we're in November, but I thought it would be good just to show what we actually have coming up ahead of us, and this is a video that one of our talented IT people put together.
Yes, I'm more than happy.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. So as you can see, we have a full program for 2022-23, and we're still assessing and rectifying the damage from the storms earlier this year, as many other local governments are. We didn't experience what Lismore experienced, and we're not experiencing what the communities of Parkes and Forbes are experiencing right now, and our hearts go out to those communities. In the Wingecarribee, we are, however, dealing with significant damage to our road network that our teams are undertaking short works on to keep them safe through cold mix until the ground sufficiently dries out to undertake the substantial repairs that they need. And I ask that the community please be patient and respectful to our road crews as they undertake that work. An update on this program, as well as the changes that have occurred in the first quarter on the paper today. The reporting on each quarter is a work in progress, which we will continue to refine over the next 12 months. In closing, in recognition of the year we've had, I would like to thank and acknowledge the significant work that all the team at Wingecarribee have undertaken. You know, sometimes there's a division between the yellow shirt teams and the plainclothes teams, but we are one team, and I want to make it very clear that the team as a whole has done an amazing job over the last 12 months. They've risen to the challenges and opportunities over the past 12 months, and they continue to rise. I also want to acknowledge the work of the executive and the managers during this time. Working in a change environment is complex. It requires perseverance and a lot of resilience. We are resetting the organisation and refocusing on the future and rebuilding trust and confidence both within this organisation and between this organisation and council and the community. And in particular, I'd like to thank Karen Targa, the Director of Service Delivery and Projects, and Carmel Foster, Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing. They've both led their teams with professionalism and dedication from the time they were appointed in October last year to June 2022 and through. And it was a particularly challenging time, and I appreciate both their efforts during that time. And you too, Aidan, over the next 12 months. We look forward to working in and with our community over the next 12 months. Thank you, Mr. May.
Look, I can only echo the words of the General Manager. The General Manager leads the engine room, which produces all this, and there's been a lot of change in the council. The roadmap is being adhered to, and so it's clear for residents to understand the complexity of what is going on. But at the same time, you know, the day-to-day activities of the council are continuing, and this massive program of capital works, not to mention strategic deliveries that are going on. It is a substantial workload, and I thank everybody for their involvement in that. I would like to add that to the annual report, but it's not really appropriate to do that, I don't think, because this is a statutory document which goes, but I thank the General Manager for the presentation that has occurred, so that residents have a much better handle on the complexity of what we all walked into. Can I just ask a question? The annual report, it goes to the department, but will it also go to everybody on the council's email contact list?
Through Mr Mayor, my goodness, through Mr May, it's uploaded to Council's website, and we can certainly put it out through the e-news that goes out each week on a Friday with a link to that document.
And the video, which I think if it's done internally, everybody associated with that should be congratulated, and it again shows what is happening presently rather than the annual report which is passed. That will also go to everybody?
Through Mr May, we can create a link on our website as well to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'd be fabulous. Okay, in relation to item 9.2, the annual report 2021-22, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 26 of the business paper and declare that carried. We now move on to the quarterly delivery program and budget review to the 30th September. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr May. We'll have the Manager Governance and Corporate Performance, Ms Lidgard, introduce this item, and then our Chief Financial Officer, Mr Kuzmanovsky, will also speak to this item. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, General Manager. The quarterly progress report on the delivery program and operational plan provides an overview of Council's progress made towards achieving the objectives set out in these plans. The report also outlines Council's key achievements as well as those areas that require attention and programs and projects that have been placed on hold during the reporting period. At the end of September 2022, 170 annual deliverables were on track, 9 were on hold, 1 was delayed, and none were considered critical. Further details of this are outlined in attachment 1 to this report. Some of the key deliverables achieved during this quarter include expansion works commencing at Mossvale War Memorial Aquatic Centre Health Club, commencement of water main renewal work in Barrel CBD, commencement of bridge replacement works in Wilds Meadow and Mittagong. A successful tulip time was held from the 16th of September to the 3rd of October 2022. Renewal of wastewater network beneath Corbett Gardens was undertaken. Fundamental youth-led creative arts projects commenced. Council hosted the 2022 NAIDOC flag raising ceremony and an opening of the NAIDOC art exhibition in the atrium gallery of the Civic Centre. Council was also successful in securing event funding for over $287,000 through Reconnecting Regional New South Wales Community Event Program to hold a large-scale community event that aims to reconnect communities and facilitate economic recovery in the local area. A new procurement policy was adopted to ensure that Council continues to comply with its legislative requirements, including those related to the Modern Slavery Act. Work was undertaken to finalise the draft Environment and Climate Change Action Plan, and work also commenced on the development of a waste and resource management strategy. I'll now hand over to the Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Ms Lidgard. From a financial perspective, the first quarterly review brings to account a number of changes, including movements relating to inflation and interest rates. Council's opening working capital position from the audited financial statements is $6.48 million, $1.48 million above the working capital position that was forecast at $5 million. Adding to this working capital position, the original budget surplus of $393,000 from the original budget and $83,000 from this quarterly review brings together a working capital position of approximately $6.95 million. The report captures a revised interest forecast of $5.4 million in total, approximately $4.4 million above the original budget estimate. Of the $4.4 million increase, approximately $1.1 million is related to general revenue. $850,000 of the general revenue increase is allocated to the increased costs associated with the Bowral Memorial Hall project, amongst other adjustments to reflect the projected forecasts of Council's expenditure. The report also proposes a funding strategy for the SES and animal shelter for a total of $8.6 million. The funding strategy is required to complete the requirements of the Office of Local Government Capital Expenditure Review Guidelines. There is currently $5.4 million allocated to the project, with the report recommending that the remaining funding shortfall be funded as follows. $1.256 million of working capital surplus allocated to fund the SES and animal shelter project, and a loan of $1.091 million to remain the funding shortfall of the project. The capital expenditure review is anticipated to be submitted to the OLG in December 22. The report also notes the outcome of the banking services quotation, where Council has entered into a contract with the Commonwealth Bank of Australia after a competitive quotation process. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia will replace the National Australia Bank as Council's banking service provider. The report also seeks to amend a funding agreement with Destination Sydney and Surrounds to include the development of Southern Highlands Horse Week event. There is no financial impact to the Council if the funding agreement is amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I also received a letter today from Mr. Richard Anderson, which I thought was going to be tabled at the meeting today. You haven't seen it? Look, I received a letter from Mr. Anderson today in relation to DA processing times and sewerage treatment works, which I apologise if I didn't pass it on. I will table it. I haven't got it with me, but I'll make sure it's incorporated into the minutes. I found it a very constructive response to this report.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, yes, I do recall seeing that come through late this morning, so we can attach that to the minutes.
If you don't mind, because I'm going to deal
Apologies.
with it in my recommendation. As I forecast earlier with the auditors, I don't agree with using cash funds for the animal shelter and the SES. It's intergenerational, but whilst I'm going to move this recommendation, it may be subject to a bit of change simply because the whatever you call them, the benchmarks may be exceeded, and you probably wrap me over the knuckles and say you can't do it. But let's just see how we go. So in number 2, I changed the 1.256 to $157,000, and if we can put noughts there later rather than the 1,000. Number 3, I changed the 1.901 to 3 million. The others are okay, but I do add a number 7 and a number 8. Number 7, a report be provided to Council on the costs of operating the animal shelter, detailing expenditure, revenue and capital purchases such as vehicles and the anticipated costs following completion of the new facility that will be incorporated into the forward financial plan. And 8, a report be provided to Council on opportunities to fund portion of the capital costs of the animal shelter and the SES building from section 7.11 contributions, having regard to the future proofing of both facilities. And now I'm going to add a number 9. Let me know when you're ready. A report be submitted to the next meeting of Council a status report. Be submitted to the next meeting of Council on DA processing times and the matters raised by Mr. Richard Anderson be fully addressed in that report. that's fine, isn't it? I'm happy with that. That's good. But don't forget we've got to attach Mr. Anderson's letter, that's all, so it makes sense. Okay, in relation to 9.3, I'd move the officer's recommendation amending 2 and 3 and adding 7, 8 and 9 and declare that carried. 9.4, the investment report.
Thank you, Mr. May, to the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Again, just a statutory report on the investment update. So again, Council was compliant with its investment policy in providing investments for the month. The variance is tracking to the original budget as the quarterly review has now been adopted for the next quarterly review. We'll update the variance to track against adopted budget. So nothing further.
Yeah. Thank you. In relation to item 9.4, the investment report, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 175 of the business paper and declare that carried. The executive listening tour, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Manager Governance and Corporate Performance will introduce this item. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an overview of the 2022 Executive Listening Tour and outline the format for the 2023 Listening Tour. Following the appointment of the General Manager and 3 directors, an Executive Listening Tour was announced. The tour was an important step in rebuilding of the organisation and restoring trust, transparency and openness between both Council and the community, and to also demonstrate Council's desire to work alongside communities in the Shire. As a part of this, it was important for the new executive to understand what residents liked about where they lived, what opportunities they see and challenges they face in their communities. The listening tour involved the executive team and Council's new place liaison officer visiting all Wingecarribee villages and towns, firstly to listen to residents and then work with the community to identify areas they would like to retain and build on, and what areas that needed to be addressed. Over 230 community members across the Shire attended the listening tour. The Council report outlines the common matters raised as a part of these listening tours and Council's associated action and response. Following the listening tour, feedback was sought from attendees via a survey. Overall, feedback was positive. Based on the feedback from the community and an internal review of the executive tour, the following format is proposed for 2023. The meetings will be combined based on 4 geographic areas as follows. Northern villages consisting of Yarramble, Coloval, Hilltop, Balmoral and Buxton. Southern villages consisting of Exeter, Bundanoon, Penrose and Wingelow. Eastern villages consisting of Avalon, Fitzroy Falls, Kangaloon, Burrawang, Wilds Meadow, Robertson and Glenquarry. Western villages consisting of Kenyon-Lee, Berrima, New Berrima and Medway. Future listening tours will commence at 5:30 for up to 2 hours, and the first meetings will commence in March 2023. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You appear to have missed in the tours High Range and Bulleo, which, whilst they're to the west, you can't put them in with Kenyon-Lee, because whilst you could probably throw a stone, driving and getting there is a lot different. So could I just change number 2, that the proposed format of the 2023 listening tour include High Range and Bulleo, and how you do it, I don't really know. Yeah, you have to work it out. I'll be quite frank, I don't know on my current tour where I'm going to either, but if I haven't, they'll be like other people and letting me know I haven't been there. So no doubt you'll hear from them. So anyhow, in relation to 9.5, I would move the officer's recommendation just amended to include High Range and Bulleo, and declare that carried. We now move to the Stormwater Management Plan, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Manager Assets, Mr. Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the results of the public exhibition of the draft stormwater management policy and seek Council's adoption of the updated policy. The draft policy was placed on public exhibition for 28 days from the 22nd of July to the 19th of August, with the policy exhibited via the Your Say Wingecarribee website and awareness for the exhibition created through Council's social media channels. During the exhibition period, the Your Say Wingecarribee page received 375 visits. The draft policy was downloaded 171 times, and a total of 16 submissions were received. In light of the submissions received, the document has been updated to include a reference to the Wingecarribee Environmental Strategy, as well as several other minor updates in light of Water New South Wales submission. It is, however, understood that all these changes made do not have a material impact on the actual content of the policy. A full list of the submissions received and a response to each is provided within attachment 2 of the report. Through the adoption and implementation of the policy, it is expected that the community will experience an improved level of service from Council in relation to the response of stormwater related matters and consistency in the communication received. It is therefore recommended that Council adopt and implement the stormwater management policy.
Thank you. Look, and thanks for this policy. Thank the staff for developing it. And I think it's going to make it clearer for everybody as to who is responsible for what, and the enormous amount of time that the Council in the past has devoted to intra-allotment drainage. It's a private matter that the Council has no role unless the Council has approved a development and there's legacy issues. But I think this makes it clear. It kind of debunks my view about Your Say Wingecarribee when you get substantial submissions from residents. I've carefully read them, and people have made a really fair income contribution to what we're doing, which is wonderful to see. So, maybe Your Say Wingecarribee has good and bad sides. I don't know, but you won't keep everybody happy. In relation to item 9.6, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 208 of the business paper and declare that carried. 9.17, the bushland tender, there's no introduction. Accordingly, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 252 of the business paper and declare that carried. 9.8, which is the water and sewer laboratory analysis tender. There's no introduction to that. Accordingly, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 262 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. The Southern Highlands Botanic Gardens update, and I would note that were addressed earlier by a resident or the CEO of the gardens in relation to this matter. And in your introduction, I'd asked if you could address some of the matters that were raised in that presentation, please.
I'll give it my best shot.
Thank you, Manager Assets. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. That's all right, Mr. Administrator.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update in relation to the plan of management for the site of the Southern Highlands Botanic Gardens, and to also seek a resolution from Council in regards to the water filling station and its interaction with the informal car park. As part of the strategy to avoid unregulated extraction of water from the water supply network, Council has provided a network of formal water filling stations across the Shire. A renewal and upgrade program for this network of water filling stations is currently nearing completion, with the final location remaining being this Bowral water filling station. This water filling station is largely located within the road reserve of Kangaloon Road and is accessed via Old South Road. With the water filling station being one of the most heavily used stations in the Shire, and it providing a central location for users, permanent removal of the water filling station was concluded to not be a viable outcome. Relocation of the water filling station to the other side of Kangaloo Road has been considered. However, the estimated $500,000 in project costs due to the traffic facilities that would be required are beyond what can be accommodated within the water fund. This is largely because in the coming years the fund will be facing significant financial constraints through the delivery of several large projects like the Bowral to Mossvale water main duplication, the Wingecarribee water treatment plant upgrades and the Hill Road reservoir duplication. That withstanding, it is important to acknowledge that it is a difficult exercise to identify what is the best location for the water filling station and what the right pathway to take now is. The matter has been the subject of significant communication with the Southern Highlands Botanical Gardens to date, and I do acknowledge they have made it very clear that their expressed preference is for the water filling station to be located on the other side of Kangaloo Road. But I think it's less that the relocation of the water filling station is not a good project, because it is a good project. It's just that it is well beyond what the scope is for the water filling station renewal program, and I believe it would be a poor use of the water fund, and there is no other funding source readily identifiable. The new water stations utilise an improved operating and billing system with the Montica sort of database that runs the old stations that's slated to no longer be supported from early 2023. And so in light of all that, it's therefore concluded that the renewal of the water filling station in its current location with signage, line marking and bollards implemented to better delineate the public car park and the water filling station is the most prudent course of action to take. As part of this work, the location of the filling station would be slightly adjusted such that it is then entirely located within the road reserve. And it is also in light of this, it's also therefore recommended that Council does not proceed with the closure of the road reserve.
If the council was to continue with the closure of the road reserve, but give an easement to itself over the road reserve, over the closed section, there'd be no need to change anything associated with the water station, would there?
So there's a renewal of the water station required as a separate matter to the car park and Botanic Gardens, purely just as part of the rolling program for the renewal of those stations to bring them in line with the improved billing system and operation system. So that would be required, I guess, irrespective of the outcome of whether the road is closed or not closed. There's then the separate matter again of the interaction of the operation of the car park and the operation of the water filling station. I think the current arrangement, because it's not really delineated or marked out on site, and so I think that has resulted in some conflicts which we need to resolve.
Do you know anything about a dog being killed in the car park?
No, I wasn't aware of that one, but that's not to say it didn't happen.
I think the coordinator is keen to say something.
To address your question in relation to the easement, we could have an easement around the section where the water filling station is located. We would also require a right of access, but the closure could go ahead if that was included in the plan when the title is created for the road, for the first title for the lot when it's no longer road.
With a view to it being with a view to it being incorporated into the existing lease of the Botanical Garden, so that aspect is finalised, and that gives them surety, and then
So
I would think long after I'm gone, people can worry about the water. Is it feasible to put time limits when you can't get water, or do they come and go any old time?
I'm unsure if that's actually a feature of the software. However, we could look to put operation timeframes around the water filling station.
From the computer records, can you tell whether there's much weekend activity?
Unfortunately, that's one of the restrictions of the current software, where there's limited information available as to who is actually using it. We can tell total consumption, and we're confident that we can tell that it is the second most drawn upon water filling station since its install. However, we don't have the stats of individual day usage.
So you're going to upgrade it. There's one behind the sale yards, which I've seen people using, and there's one in Robinson, just as you come into Robinson you're doing what they've got down there, are you? Or?
Yes, so all those other water filling stations have been renewed.
Yeah.
I think some of them were new locations as well. I believe there's 8 or 9 across the Shire. Given that it's for the purpose of trying to encourage people to not just use standpipes illegally at all the hydrants throughout the network, it's that balancing act of trying to provide them in convenient locations such that they will be used.
Look, I totally understand, and I agree it's really impractical to spend $500,000 when some people don't even have water, and you want to guarantee the security of the whole system, and that's why you're renewing stuff. And as I understand it, the council froze water charges some years ago, so that's money that that is gone. Can I then move and okay. Pursuant to Part 4, Division 3 of the Roads Act 1993, Council as Roads Authority formally approve the closure of the road reserve at the corner of Kingaloon Road and Old South Road, add some words, with a view to it being included in the lease of the Southern Highlands Botanic Gardens and the General Manager be delegated authority in that regard. Number 2, the General Manager and Administrator be delegated authority to execute under the Common Seal of Council any agreement, plan, real property dealing or any other document in respect of the proposed closure of the road reserve referred to in item 1 above, not resolution. 3, authority be delegated to the General Manager to execute on behalf of Council any other document associated with the road closure referred to in item 1 above, which does not require the affixing of the Common Seal of Council. 4, the registered title created of the road reserve referred to in item 1 above include an easement to allow for continual operation of the water filling station, together with a right of access for vehicles using the water filling station. If you just change the resolutions to item, as you can see, we would have been discussing this matter before your presentation. That's happy with that? Look, I'm happy to adopt this substituting item for resolution. Okay, everyone knows what we're talking about. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 and 4 substituting item for resolution. You happy with that? Declare that carried. So, thank you. See you on Sunday. We now move to 42 Banksia Street, Colo Vale. General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. I'll ask the Coordinator Property Services, Ms McCulloch, to introduce this item.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, consultation has been undertaken with the Colo Vale community to discuss the allocation of funds from the sale of land at 42 Banksia Street, Colo Vale. From that previous consultation with the Colo Vale community, clear themes have emerged outlining what the community wished to be delivered, including a skate park and pump track. A second round of consultation was undertaken to determine the more appropriate location between Jerd Park or land at Railway Avenue that is owned by Transport Heritage. Council officers have recommended that Jerd Park be upgraded, and this recommendation has been based upon two main elements. The first consideration being the size and shape of the land at Railway Avenue. A review of the Railway Avenue site has determined the location unsuitable for construction of a skate park and pump track. These were the two main items that were requested by the community through the first round of consultation. The second consideration is the timing of delivery. Council has not been able to gain any commitment from Transport Heritage as to use of the site. The last update from Transport Heritage advised that they were working toward finalising design for the Colo Vale Station precinct. Accordingly, given the constraints of the Railway Avenue site, the report recommends funding be allocated for the upgrade of Jerd Park, including a pump track and skate park elements.
Thank you. Were you in the room when the gentleman from Colo Vale spoke?
I came in while he was speaking. I missed the first part.
Was Mr. Park involved in the negotiations about the use of the Station Street area at Colo Vale?
He has been a contact for them. I have also been speaking directly with Heritage, but I have emailed them on many occasions to get updates, but I haven't heard back.
Okay. Look, as I indicated earlier, I'm going to defer this matter. So in relation to item 10.1, 42 Banksia Avenue, I would move the matter be deferred to allow further consultation with the administrator and local residents, and further information be sought from the Med Shed on the amount required to finalise construction. There's a lot of people in Colo Vale happy, a lot of people are unhappy. I don't have a magic wand, but I think I would like to talk with them down there. I don't agree with it going into curb and gutter or drainage or anything like that. That wasn't the intent of the council's resolution, and I'll declare that carried. General Manager, the draft investment policy.
919.14.
Sorry.
No, sorry, you're right. Apologies. Sorry, to the Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. May. The property investment policy and property investment strategy have been developed to enhance and diversify Council's long-term operational income, and will help also increase the own source operating revenue ratio as discussed at the audit presentation. Diversification of Council's income sources will support Council's long-term financial sustainability and allow for continued delivery of quality services to the community. Income generated from the property investment will enhance Council's ability to deliver existing and new initiatives, providing opportunity to positively impact on community outcomes. Prior to placing the draft property investment strategy on public exhibition, the strategy will be amended to remove the reference to investment in property outside of the Wingecarribee local government area. This report recommends that the draft property investment policy and property investment strategy be placed on public exhibition, with a further report to be presented to Council following the conclusion of the consultation period.
I generally support this, but I don't support the concept of the possibility of the Council doing stuff outside of the local government area. But any council should be looking all the time at its assets. And so, this is a very good report, and I thank everybody involved in its preparation. But I'm going to make a slight change. I would move that the officer's recommendation be adopted, subject to, quote, including assets outside the Windsor Carriby LGA, end of quote, being deleted from the draft policies prior to exhibition. 1 and 2 disappear. It just becomes 3 stands alone, thanks. Thank you. I declare that carried. Next item is 9.12, the sundry debtor write-off. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr May. To the Chief Financial Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. This report is proposed for council write-off of debt, which was raised in 2017. The write-off is in accordance with the local government regulations on the basis that it was of a decision of a court. The amount to be written off is $48,243.87, and a provision has been made for this debt and will not have an impact on council's operating budget. Thank you.
And just one question. How come the court case happened some years ago? How come we're just writing it off now? It got missed along the way, did it? Or?
Yeah, I'm just doing the right thing and writing it off. That's right. So it's been identified to me. So with the new revenue coordinator, we've picked it up and brought it to council's attention. So.
Yeah. And reading the information in the confidential sections, I just wonder whether we need to have another clause in this recommendation to ensure that that remains. I don't know why it is confidential. It's been to court. And it's a court direction.
Mr Mayor, I think there are there's other information beyond the court directions in the attachment. We can seek advice as to whether or not we should open it up, but the view at the moment is it remains confidential.
Well, you're going to have to do someone's going to have to write me another clause, like we did at the meeting for the garbage. So we can come back to this one if you want. Otherwise, it's a similar process. Anyone can come and gipper it if there's no resolution protecting it. Yeah. There's no hurry. There's plenty of time left in the meeting, I think. So we'll come back to that one. The Southern Highlands Bridge Club, General Manager.
3, Mr May. Before I ask the Coordinator Property Services to speak to this item, I wish to table an email that was received from Mr Curry from the Southern Highlands Bridge Club this morning at 8:12 a.m. If I may, I might just read the contents of that email.
Yes, please.
On behalf of the Southern Highlands Bridge Club, I respectfully request that item 9.13, scheduled for tonight's council meeting, be deferred until the first meeting in the new year. The main issues which have prompted this request being, 1, that our ongoing negotiations with Moss Vale Golf Club have been temporarily suspended given the untimely death of the president some weeks ago and the absence of our club president, who is currently overseas. Consequently, it will not be appropriate to resume or discussions until mid-December. 2, given there is no urgency for the Southern Highlands Bridge Club to surrender the lease or for the council to seek to resolve the matter, it is somewhat premature to consider the council officer's recommendations stated in the agenda paper at this point in time. And 3, the deferment will provide us with an opportunity to resume our negotiations with the Moss Vale Golf Club with their new president, and then provide council with an update in the new year. And that's under Mr Curry's signature.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr May, Council has received a request from the Southern Highlands Bridge Club for a one-off payment of $150,000. At the time of the request, the Bridge Club advised the Administrator and General Manager that they were securing a 10-year lease plus a 10-year option with Moss Vale Golf Club. On 20 July 2022, Council resolved that authority be delegated to the General Manager to action the officer's recommendation, subject to the General Manager being satisfied that any lease arrangements between the Bridge Club and the Moss Vale Golf Club are in the community's interest. Following the resolution of Council, a meeting was held between members of the Bridge Club and Council officers. Prior to that meeting, the Bridge Club advised that they were now looking at securing a 5-year lease with no option period. Council officers expressed concern in relation to the lease term being offered and asked that the Bridge Club approach the Golf Club to try and negotiate a longer lease term. Council has received correspondence from the Bridge Club advising that whilst they are confident of a long-term relationship with the Golf Club would not commit to a lease beyond the initial, a 5-year term. This report sets out the options available and recommends that the requested payment be made on a pro rata basis in line with the lease term negotiated.
Thank you. This is a difficult one because the Southern Highlands Bridge Club, in my view, shouldn't be in a worse position when we finish this than when we start it. I agree with the decision to defer, but I'll make my position abundantly clear, and that was in my early negotiations, it was a 10 by 10. And I suggested in the community interest that the option period should be for a community-based rent, not a commercial rent. And that's why I'm very clear in my understanding of my negotiations. I'll go further and say that if this in effect falls over, I like the option 2 in your report. So I'm going to move that in accordance with the request from the Southern Highlands Bridge Club, the matter be deferred until the February meeting of Council on the understanding that the Council's delegation to the General Manager to finalise the matter dated 20 July 2022 be maintained, and declare that carried. In saying that, I don't think it should really matter if they only have a 5-year lease of the existing facility, so long as there is surety for the next 15 years of a similar space at any facility the club may have. I think otherwise we are not protecting the community interest. Thank you. 9.14, draft grants, donations and sponsorship policy. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr May. To the Manager Governance and Corporate Performance. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. This report provides the outcomes from the public exhibition of Council's draft grants, donations and sponsorship policy. The draft policy was endorsed for public exhibition at the Council meeting held on the 20th of July 2022. The exhibition commenced on the 22nd of July and concluded on the 19th of August. A project page was set up on Your Say Wingecarribee, and over 3,500 registered members of Your Say Wingecarribee were notified of the exhibition. The exhibition was also advertised by Council's weekly electronic newsletter and community update. The project page received over 205 visits from 157 people, and the draft policy was downloaded 70 times. A total of 12 written submissions were completed. These submissions are summarised in attachment 1 in the report, together with a response from Council officers. Based on the feedback provided in the submissions and following internal review, the number of changes are recommended. The most significant is to clause 2.18 concerning financial assistance to exclude mining companies whose business is in the extraction or sale of coal, oil or gas. Also to vary the exclusions regarding businesses involved in gambling to allow licensed clubs in the support of council events and functions through in-kind sponsorship. and to vary the exclusions regarding business involved in the manufacture, distribution and wholesale of alcohol related to products to include the example of local wineries and distilleries. Other clauses were amended to provide greater clarity around the intent of that clause. This report recommends the grants, donations and sponsorship policy be adopted.
Thank you. In the report, can you point me to where the council requires accountability for these grants in their annual reports or financial statements? Please.
Just section 2.2.9. Sorry, through you. Section 2.2.9 for any grants that have been applied for requires an agreement to be entered into and an acquittal process to be conducted.
So, excuse my ignorance, but that would mean that there'd have to be an incorporated body and they'd have to have audited financial statements to get the grant?
It could be an individual that could be a recipient of the grant as well, as long as they enter into an agreement with council. The understanding in writing this part of the policy from my perspective is that they follow the submission. If there's a requirement to put receipts in as a part of what they've spent the money on, that is a part of the acquittal process.
What worries me is that this is public money, and what procedures do we have in place to ensure that it is properly spent after it's given? And the other thing is, there needs to be a recognition of the ratepayers' money when people get grants, in my view.
So we just through you, Chair, we might need to structure the funding agreements where the funds, there is an acquittal process where the funds may not be given fully up front, or there may be a staged acquittal process where upon different gateways through those agreements that you would have those structured through, and those acquittals are ultimately reviewed by whoever's administering that grant process.
So we need another clause in the recommendation, do we, or?
I thought the wording of 2.2.9 was sufficient, but if you believe...
No, well, you're ultimately responsible, you're the CFO.
Yeah.
But how do you guarantee other people in the organisation have an understanding? You do, but do others? That's, and does the recipient have an understanding? Like, say there's a kennel club or something to the like, and they get 5,000 every year. They just shouldn't get a cheque sent to them. There needs to be some way to guarantee that it's been properly spent. The ratepayer has got a recognition for their money. So how does that happen?
So if it's a donation, that's where a cheque of $5,000 would be written. We'd advertise that in the operational plan. If it is a process, it would go through a program process. I believe we would advertise it on the website saying here's the terms of conditions of applying for this grant, specifically a grant, and then the subsequent administration, which would fall into some sort of internal guideline that we'd have to develop operationally to say, here's the steps you've got to follow when you're administering a grant as an officer of council in writing out cheques to these individuals, entities, corporations, whoever they are.
There has been some money given by this council where they've asked me to sign the letter and I've refused, left it to the General Manager, because I can't be guaranteed. It's just not because you got it last year, you get it this year. So is there a process to guarantee that?
Yeah, sorry, just to add to what the CFO said. So before you tonight's the policy. Underpinning policies are operational procedures that basically operationalise the policy, and then there will be forms that support that and internal processes. So I'm comfortable, and I believe the CFO is expressing he's comfortable, that we will have the procedures that operationalise the policy internally. Thank you.
You're comfortable, I'm comfortable. In relation to item 9.14, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 320 of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Next item is 9.15, Chelsea Gardens.
Thank you, Mr. May. The Director of Communities and Places has been waiting for this moment. So item 9.15, thank you, Mr. Davis.
Thank you. Mr. May, in April this year, Council received a report on outlining the history of the new residential living area in Mossvale known as Chelsea Gardens, Comungie, and now more recently now named Ashbourne. At that time, Council was there was the first significant development application for that new residential living area, and the planning for that estate had a long history. As a result of, or at the time in April, Council resolved that a further report come back to Council following the determination of the application by the Southern Regional Planning Panel to advise of the outcome. So that development application was to be determined by the Regional Planning Panel. And I can advise, following a lengthy assessment process that went over several years, a number of amendments and lengthy deliberations at the Southern Regional Planning Panel meeting on the 14th of June, the panel did determine the application for approval, subject to conditions. The application was notified for 30 days as required by the legislation. Letters were sent to 106 properties at the time, and 7 submissions were received in response to that notification, and they were considered as part of the process. In summary, in relation to the approved development, I can summarise it as follows. It was for the concept plan for the development over 9 stages, up to 1,073 lots, residential lots, water and sewer servicing, internal road connections, and also the first stage of subdivision, as well as the wider concept plan, the first stage of subdivision, which involves an initial 178 residential lots, 2 public reserves, a residue business lot, which will ultimately be for the local neighbourhood retail, bulk earthworks, internal road construction, riparian corridor and drainage, infrastructure works, and a number of other works as well. The panel, as I said at the time, resolved to approve that application, and there will be subsequent development applications, detailed development applications that will come in stages against that'll be assessed against that concept plan, as well as the development control plan and the LEP. Mr. May, the recommendation is that the report and its contents be noted in satisfaction of the Council resolution of the 20th of April, and also that the outcome and decision of the Regional Planning Panel be published on Council's website.
Thanks for that. The Council's representative on the panel was who? On page 355 is the panel members. Was it Michael Mant?
That's right. Mr. May, the panel's representative, the Council's representative on the panel was Stephen Leafley.
And he's on our local panel?
Yes, that's correct.
Is he one of the alternate chairs?
That's correct. He's the alternate chair.
Thank you. Am I right in understanding, this is just a small part of the whole package, but when the Council gets its act together on section 90, what do they call them? The developer contributions, we will be able to apply any new developer contribution arrangement we have to the remaining parts of the subdivision? I'm happy if you defer to
Yeah.
Mr Park.
To Mr Mayor, I might ask Mr Park to confirm, but my understanding is that because there's an initial application, but it's a concept plan approval, and the first stage of 9 stages, but in subsequent stages they will apply whatever applies at the time. So if there's a new plan, new contribution, unless there has been some other agreement, like a planning agreement, be formalised, otherwise that's how it would work, Mr Mayor.
I think this is extremely important for the community that they understand.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I might just ask Mr Park just to clarify where we're at with our developer contributions framework and then how they apply as new developments come online. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr Mayor, you're correct in that if and when Council update its contributions framework, so new contributions plans and development servicing plans, that any development application, including subsequent stages of the Chelsea Gardens development, would be subject to contributions in accordance with the new plans. So if we were to adopt plans in 6 months from now, they would be applied to every subsequent stage of the Chelsea Gardens development. So stage 1 was levied under our current framework because they were the plans that were applicable at the time, but that will change as we adopt new plans. In terms of where we're currently at in terms of our contribution system, we are undertaking a couple of really critical projects that the needs analysis, so looking at what our infrastructure needs are to meet our population growth, so the community and recreation facility strategy, and about to commence the integrated transport strategy, and they would directly inform new contribution plans which will be applied to any development post the adoption of those plans.
And they would be over and above the requirement of the big picture approval for access out to Illawarra Highway and water and sewer?
Look, it's a really good question. Yes, they would be. What's probably important to note for the benefit of the community in terms of how the Chelsea Gardens development approval works is that because the land is mapped as an urban release area, it's subject to what's called satisfactory arrangements provisions, and that is that the state government need to sign off that the infrastructure network, so the state infrastructure network, is satisfactory for the development. And in achieving satisfactory arrangements for this development, the developer entered into a voluntary planning agreement with the state government to deliver key infrastructure upgrades, and that includes a road linking, I think they called it the Northeast Collector Road, possibly, linking the Chelsea Gardens release area with the Illawarra Highway, and a realignment of that intersection and a roundabout at that intersection. So that will be completed at the developer's cost. And in addition to those works, they'll also make monetary contributions to the state government for intersection upgrades along the length of Argyle Street. So while they'll contribute to local infrastructure upgrades, they've also contributed towards that state infrastructure network.
Look, I only ask the questions because residents are concerned that nothing much is going to happen when a lot is going to happen. My other issue is that when the council has proper contributions plans that acknowledge the situation at the moment, that we're not going to be caught out by missing out on those ones. Okay, thank you very much. In relation to item 9.15, Chelsea Gardens, Kumunji, I've moved the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 350 of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare that carried.
Excuse me, Mr May, would you mind if we go back to 9.12 just to tidy up the resolution in relation to sundry debt write-off?
Yes,
reports?
yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Ms Lidgard, if you could please provide the wording. Thank you.
So I'd recommend that a point 2 be added, attachment 1 to the sundry debtors write-off report be withheld from access to the media and public as required by section 11 and then in brackets 2 of the Local Government Act 1993 for the following reasons. And then so A, attachment 1 includes advice. That is confidential in accordance with section 10A 2 in brackets of the Local Government Act 1993. Under clause 10A2G, advice concerning litigation or advice that would otherwise be privileged from production in legal proceedings on the ground of legal professional privilege.
In relation to item 9.19, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 380 of the business paper 1 and number 2, being attachment 1 to the sundry debtor write-off report, be withheld from access to the media and public as required by section 11.2 of the Local Government Act for the following reasons. Attachment 1 includes advice that is confidential in accordance with section 10 capital A2 of the Local Government Act and under clause 10 A2G, advice concerning litigation or advice that would otherwise be privileged from production of legal proceedings on the ground of legal professional privilege, and would declare that carried. And could I ask in the future, where there's confidential matters, rather than putting people through hell, that be included in the recommendation? We now move to Children's Services update.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Manager, Governance and Corporate Performance.
Thank you, General Manager. In 2019, a service delivery review of children's services was completed, and in November 2019, Council resolved to undertake a further review after 2 years, and continue with direct service delivery for 3 years. This report provides a status update on the further service delivery review of Council's children's services as required by the 2019 Council resolution. Following a request for quotation process in early 2022, a consultant was engaged to undertake the subsequent review. As per the 2019 resolution, the scope was to assess the effectiveness of the business and marketing plan, reassess the issues and risks identified in the 2019 review, consider the financial model of the service, and undertake consultation with key stakeholders and staff. The review commenced in January 2022 with a desktop analysis, interviews, surveys with internal and external stakeholders, and staff workshops. A review report was provided in May. Based on this report, another consultant was engaged to undertake financial modelling, a demographic review, and a risk assessment to provide Council with options for each of its services, as Council provides out of school care and family day care. This report was intended to supplement the May 2022 report. This review commenced in June 2022 and the report was provided in October. Now that both reports have been received, further consultation will be undertaken with staff on the key findings, recommendations and options. It's anticipated that the consultation process will be completed by mid-December and a further report will be brought to Council in early 2023, outlining outcomes of the Children's Service Review, as well as feedback from staff consultations and recommendations.
In relation to item 9.16, the Children's Services Review update, could I respectfully suggest that it's not too early in 2023 because school holidays and the like, and I have no idea what's happening here, but you want to make sure that you're not criticised for doing something over the holiday period. So, probably March, April is going to be a better outcome. In relation to item 9.16, I'd move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 364 of the business paper 1 and 2 and declare that carried. Rate water and sewerage access subsidies. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Back to our Chief Financial Officer. Thank you, Mr. Kuzmanowski.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to obtain approval for the allocation of the rate, water and sewerage access subsidy in accordance with adopted policy to the 22-23 rates and charges. The total amount of the subsidies being provided is approximately $74,000 to 48 applicants, which is fully budgeted for. As this brings to close the 22-23 allocation, it is proposed to retire this policy and realign it as a program to align with the principles of the now newly adopted grants, donations and sponsorship policy presented to Council earlier. This will be presented as a part of the programs when we bring the operational plan to Council in the 23-24 financial year.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.17, water, sewer and sewerage access subsidies, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 367 of the business paper, items 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Balmoral Reserve update.
Thank you, Mr. May. To the Manager of Assets. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the delivery of the Balmoral Reserve upgrade project. A recent habitat assessment of Balmoral Reserve confirmed the presence of threatened vegetation within the site, but also that these are obviously not located within the large areas cleared as a result of the recovery works of the 2019-20 bushfires, and that the habitat potential within these areas has also been significantly degraded. Internal review of the habitat assessment has concluded that works within the cleared area can be delivered through a standard review of environmental factors process. However, no works will be permitted within the uncleared areas as they would require a biodiversity assessment report and the purchase of subsequent offset credits, both of which would be cost prohibitive given the project budget. In light of this, a first round of consultation has been undertaken with the Balmoral Village Association, from which the first iteration of the concept design has been prepared. This concept design will form the basis for a second round of consultation with the association and also with the wider Balmoral community, the results of which will formalise the design and enable construction to be undertaken in the back half of this year.
Your report notes that there was another meeting on the 8th of November. What happened then?
They want to see the turf area maximised for the cleared area of the space. So with the concept design that's currently been done for the first iteration, there is the ability to increase that turf area a little bit more to consume more of that cleared space closer to the fence.
Within the budget?
Correct, yep.
Okay. Well done. In relation to item 9.18, Balmoral Reserve update, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 374 of the business paper and declare that carried. Next item relates to outdoor dining. There's no introduction. Accordingly, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 380 of the business papers, items 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Festival of Lights.
Thank you,
General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing will speak to this item.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. May. The Festival of Lights will run from the 3rd to the 31st of December, primarily in Corbett Gardens, and is managed by Business Southern Highlands, formerly the Chamber of Commerce. The event also incorporates the Angels in Our Town Street Parade in Bowral on Saturday 10th September, the Winter Wonderlight display in Corbett Gardens and Santa's Grotto in the Senior Citizens Hall at the Gardens, amongst other events. The committee are hoping to hold a Business Southern Highlands, formerly Chamber networking event and a New Year's Eve ticketed event, both in Corbett Gardens, and Business Southern Highlands have asked that Council provide exclusive use of Corbett Gardens on the 15th of December and the 31st of December for Christmas and New Year celebrations.
Thank you. In relation to item 9.20, the Festival of Lights, exclusive use of Corbett Gardens, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 383 of the business paper, items 1 and 2, and declare that carried. Bowral Classic, 9.21.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. And again, the Director of Corporate Strategy and Resourcing.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. May. The Bowral Classic has been coming to the Southern Highlands for 7 years and is managed by Bicycling Australia and Yaffa Publishing. The event forms part of the Grand Fondo, which translates to Big Ride, and they are held in what is stated Australia's best cycling destinations, which includes Jindabyne, Mudgee and Noosa. This year was its biggest event ever here, with 3,000 riders and their families embarking on the region for the weekend of 15th and 16th October. The event, Yaffa Publishing estimated the economic impact of the event will exceed $800,000, and we'll have a clearer figure once the spend map data report is delivered by the end of this month, when a further report can be provided to council. Given the economic benefit and the showcasing the opportunities the event provides, it is recommended that council waive fees and charges and refund Section 138 fees for the event.
Thanks. On page 386, it says Destination New South Wales conducted research of the Barrel Classic in 2019. Is that right? That 2019 figure right?
On page 386.
The first line of the report.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think that's the most recent one because then we had COVID.
Ah.
The event, yeah.
I'm going to add a number 4 to this recommendation, that a further report be brought back to council outlining the economic benefit when the actual spend data is available. So I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 386 of the business paper with 1, 2, 3 and the number 4, which I've just stated, and declare that carried. Robinson Community Centre update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. And back to the manager assets. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr. May, the purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the Robertson Community Centre, and seek endorsement for a sustainable pathway forward. The Robertson Community Centre and Preschool facility has evolved into its current layout over several decades. Unfortunately, the various extensions to the facility throughout this time have been completed in a piecemeal fashion, which has resulted in the building having 11 different roof types and alignments, with water falling in multiple directions into an inefficient guttering system, all of which has resulted in numerous and persistent water leaks over the years. The facility has been closed as a result since September 2019 due to elevated levels of mould and yeast in the community centre, and returning the facility to a long-term usable space would be a significant financial undertaking for council. It was identified that there are other facilities within Robertson which could accommodate potential users of the community centre, one of these spaces being the Robertson School of Arts building. It is therefore proposed that council partner with the Robertson School of Arts building committee to enhance the facility, to create a capacity within the facility for a meeting room size space, and that as part of a future capital program, a renewal project is undertaken on the Robertson Preschool facility, with the scope including the demolition of the community centre, renewal of the roof structure of the preschool, and optimisation of the preschool layout. All of this would be the subject of an application to the annual Crown Land Improvement Fund grant program.
Thank you, and this has been a difficult matter to deal with, but I agree that if we can partner with the Robertson School of Arts to make that a more usable facility and make it easier for the trustees there and more convenient for users, particularly in winter, it would be a great outcome. And if I could publicly thank the trustees for cooperating with us in looking at opportunities without any formal undertaking that anything is going to happen, at least they're allowing us with the community to have a look. And I think that will be a win-win-win also for the Robinson School, who I also understand use it regularly. So in relation to item 9.22, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 389 of the business paper, 1 and 2, and declare that carried. The next item is wastewater reticulation. There's no introduction. So in relation to, I'm happy with the recommendation, in relation to wastewater reticulation system, pipe bursting package tender, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 393 of the business papers, items 1 and 2, and declare that carried. General Manager, Australia Day recommendations,
Um,
celebrations, I mean.
Through Mr. May, my goodness, Mr. May. Before I speak to this item, I'll ask the manager to outline the procedural approach we'll take to this.
Thank you, General Manager. So as you would be aware, the agenda was published on Friday afternoon, and that included a report on Australia Day. Since the publishing and completion of that report, some additional information's come to light, and there's been some changes required to Australia Day. So because Australia Day was already listed on the council agenda, we've completed a late and supplementary report in addition to the report that was already listed on the agenda. So there doesn't need to be sort of any extra notice given around that. So the additional report that we'll table here and the General Manager will speak to includes some recommendations that Council may wish to consider moving as the motion, and we'll table the report as tabled here will be uploaded to Council's website following the meeting.
Thank you. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. Okay. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the way in which we have managed and communicated this matter could have been done better and earlier. As set out in the report, in the business paper itself, it was never intended to cancel Australia Day, despite media statements otherwise. Only one local media outlet took the opportunity to check the facts, and I thank them for that. The report on the paper was prepared, and closed off last Wednesday. That report appears on the business paper today and proposed that festivities continue in Berrima. Regarding the street parade, it was proposed that the Angels in Our Town event, scheduled in December as part of the Light Up program, be the event in which our volunteers' emergency services were recognised, and citizenship, at which the Citizen of the Year is announced, was proposed to take place at the Civic Centre. And the rationale for this was that the complexities of not undertaking citizenship on the date prescribed, and the centre being an all-weather venue. The Australia Day festivities in Berrima was never in question. Since the report was closed off and published, the following events have taken place. On Thursday, Council received written advice from the previous Australia Day operator that they did not wish to continue for 2023. We thank the previous operator for their work on this event over the previous years, which have been difficult with the Black Summer fires and COVID. On Thursday, following the previous operator's advice, Council contacted the Berrima Residents Association to discuss the situation, and a walkthrough of the village was arranged for that evening with key staff. On Friday, discussions were held with an experienced local operator as to the feasibility of holding the event, given the lead-in time and the context. We were met with a positive and enthusiastic response, and on Monday an event proposal was received, and that event proposal is attached in the late report received or tabled tonight. In light of the events, this further report has been prepared, and I'd just like to highlight some of the key points or elements to what's proposed. In the report that's been tabled, following advice from the previous operator, it became apparent that a development application for the Australia Day event had not been approved since 2018. A development application is required because Berrima Village is surrounded by bushfire-prone land, and as such, a DA approval is required to hold an event. There are some areas within Berrima Village which are not identified as bushfire-prone land and therefore do not require DA consent to hold an event. As a result of this information, I met with the President of the Berrima Resident Association and key council staff in the Berrima Village on the evening of Thursday the 10th of November to walk through Berrima Village and determine the suitability of the area of land not identified as bushfire prone to hold the Australia Day celebrations in 2023. On Friday the 11th of November, Council met with an experienced and local event operator, Experience Nature, to discuss the feasibility of holding the event given the lead-in time and context. The outcome of this meeting was positive, and it was determined that a refreshed approach to Australia Day celebrations could proceed in 2023. The scope for the event was a vibrant village market showcasing the best of Berrima, family-friendly fun and children's activities, tastings by local wine and whisky producers, and a showcasing of classic cars. On Monday the 14th of November, the Managing Director of Experience Nature provided Council with an event brief for the Australia Day 2023. This brief is included in Attachment 1 to this report. The brief identified 5 main areas for activation and attraction open to visitors on Australia Day, alongside the existing historical buildings, retailers, food venues. These would provide activation, attraction and support to the Berrima Village vendors. This includes looking at spaces around the Berrima, what is known as the Berrima Pound, as a family-friendly area, the use of the slip road outside Mrs Oldbuck's that connects the Old Hume to Wingecarribee Street, as well as attractions, Berrima Marketplace being used as a family picnic area, and the playground, and then focusing on local vendors and producers in Berrima Village itself, as well as surrounding areas, bringing in producers and operators such as Joadja Winery, Distillery, Bendooley Estate. We recognise the importance of the event to the local community and businesses in Berrima Village, and that is why we moved swiftly to secure an experienced and local event manager. And I wish to thank the Berrima Residents Association for their support and contribution in bringing this together over the past few days, and Nature Experience for their can-do approach. The recommendation associated with the report is that 1, Council engage Experience Nature and provide the funds allocated under the Australia Day budget allocation to this event. 2, the citizenship ceremony, including the announcement of the Citizen of the Year, take place at Berrima, with the Civic Centre to be used in the case of inclement weather. 3, following this year's event, a review be undertaken in conjunction with local businesses, residents and the Berrima Association to inform a request for quotation for future events in the Berrima Village. And 4, a report be provided to Council no later than April 2023, setting out the review and brief for the conduct of the Australia Day celebrations in Berrima Village.
Can I get a few questions?
Yes.
In relation to the former activities that happened at Berrima, are you saying that the operators or the council, whoever it was, were not complying with their statutory obligations?
What was discovered post the former operator advising that he was no longer able to continue was the fact we did not have a development consent to undertake events in Berrima associated with Australia Day.
And the gentleman who used to do it previously had agreed that there wouldn't be a citizenship ceremony or a parade this year.
I'll defer to the manager, corporate strategy and performance. However, the former operator was aware of the proposal to move the citizenship ceremony back to the Civic Centre, and I'll ask Ms Lidgard to expand on that as she's had the direct conversation.
So the community event, which was effectively the stalls and entertainment that was provided out at Berrima, was provided by the former event organiser. Council organised the civic reception, so the citizenship ceremony at Berrima, as well as the parade. My initial conversations, I did inform the event that we were moving away from the citizenship ceremony being at Berrima and as well the parade. Initially, he was comfortable going ahead, but did think it may impact on the number of people attracted to the event. And then following conversations last Thursday, he decided not to proceed.
Were the stalls and the like that form part of the entertainment, were they local or they come from everywhere?
The majority of the stalls were not local. A few local, but majority from outside.
This is a recurring theme for me in dealing with villages, that they get concerned, particularly the retailers, at the amount of people who come in from outside the area, in effect at their expense.
Yep.
So the intent now is for local produce, and a bigger emphasis on the existing retailers in the village.
And you'll recall, you may recall, we did do a survey around Australia Day, I think it was last year, and that was the strong feedback that we did receive, that they want local businesses and producers to be involved in the event. So this certainly is responding to that.
And if I could just say, for those who are interested, these were officers' recommendations. They weren't decisions of the council that people are now talking about.
Yeah. So through to you, Mr. May, that is correct. So the intention was to report to council with the proposed way forward with Australia Day. As I acknowledged at the beginning, it could have been managed better and it could have been communicated better and earlier.
I think everyone would accept that. I've been approached in relation to the relationship between the Festival of Lights and Angels in Our Town in the last paragraph of the report that was published on Wednesday. Is council, I don't understand it myself when I read it, if that can be better explained for the record?
Mr. May, I'll ask the director or the manager to expand on that. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Yes, Mr. May, the commentary around the Angels in Our Town was that parade was being undertaken in December as part of the Festival of Lights events and activities. It is about acknowledging all of the volunteers within the Wingecarribee local government area, and it's basically a similar parade to the one that has been conducted in Berrima on Australia Day. So they would only be 3 to 4 weeks, probably around about a month apart, acknowledging the same thing. So that was the comments around that.
But in relation to how much money is council providing to the Festival of Lights?
The Festival of Lights is 15,000 and around, I think it's a waiving a fee of up to $7,000.
So then how does that relate back to the Angels in Our Town? Look, I just want to set the record straight, because it appears that people, or some people, feel that the Angels in Our Town are being unfairly, indirectly criticised for, in effect, taking the Berrima parade. That's where I'm coming from.
That is not the case. That was just a commentary by council officers about the two parades. So no, the Angels in Our Town were not ever going to take away that parade from Berrima. That was just a commentary around similar parades. So that was why that was put in the report.
And the Angels in Our Town, that's being supported by both voluntary and professional first responders?
As I understand it, yes. It's being organised by the Festival of Lights event coordinators, but that's my understanding, yes.
Thank you. So General Manager, you're replacing the recommendation as outlined on page 399 with the recommendation on page 7 of the supplementary agenda? Yeah, look, I agree with the manager in relation, this matter is listed for council's consideration, and it's appropriate if the council so desires to change the recommendation of the staff, and even if that is an updated staff recommendation. So in relation to item 9.24 Australia Day Celebrations 2023, in lieu of the recommendation as outlined on page 399 of the business paper, I would move the recommendation as outlined on page 7 of the supplementary report, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and declare that carried. The next item is the IPART submission.
Thank you, Mr May. Back to the CFO. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of this report is to notify Council of the IPART submission made relating to the review of the rate peg, with this submission attached to the report. Council's submission revolved around aligning the rate peg to the integrated planning and reporting process rather than a blanket approach, which doesn't account for some local issues that Council may encounter. The submission also outlines flaws with the current rate system, which does not adequately cater for times where there is high movements in inflation and exposes the lag indicators used by IPART, which ultimately detriment Council's financial position, using the example of the rate peg set this year at 3.7%, excluding the growth factor, where CPI is coming at 7% for the September quarter. The current rate peg does not also adequately allow councils to factor in local services and service levels and funding depreciation to an adequate level, and this is evident by the number of councils continually applying for special rate variations to fund infrastructures as an industry speaking. The report is to be received and noted. Thank you.
I agree with the philosophy behind what you're suggesting in relation to the fact that I think it was 1977 when rate pegging commenced. There was no such thing as integrated planning or community strategic plans, and those plans, if they're done properly, have heavy consultation at the 10, 4 and 1 year levels with the community, and you know, one rate cap across the state really doesn't address issues of individual councils and what their communities expect them to deliver. Having said that, I happen to support some form of rate pegging, but the system now is broken. There's no question about that. And, you know, my research tells me that until last year, the CPI and the rate peg have roughly been the same when you add them, compound them all, add them all up. They're roughly the same, back from 1977. But now that we've got inflation, it's thrown a spanner in the wheel, and how the council, or how any council, with all of the challenges that we continue to have, and which are outlined in your very good submission, how we're supposed to deal with those. I think the government is going to get, or the IPART's going to get a lot of special rate variations submitted to them. Pardon me. And whether there needs to be a recognition of this weather on assets, because there's clearly, and I've been saying this for years, the casualty of rate pegging is infrastructure. But having said that, if you do a well-researched and validated SRV, you'll get it, if your community supports it. But to go through all that when you can align it to your community strategic plan, I think makes life easier for everybody, and it makes it more understanding for communities. I agree with your recommendation, excepting I don't agree with an automatic 2%. So I'm going to move that the officer's recommendation be adopted, subject to a 2% increase over the CPI being cumulative over a 4-year term, and council's submission to IPART be amended accordingly. I think we've got to take one out, and number 2 will stand by itself, but not just make it cumulative, if you don't mind.
Just with point 1, I think that might be relating to the next council item. So, yep, that's okay.
I think we've, if I could just maybe clarify, I think what was before you might relate to 9.26, which is formulating the 2% efficiency gain.
No, I'm saying the officer's recommendation be adopted. In other words, the efficiency. I didn't put that in. So it doesn't make it. My recommendation's fine. That the council notes the submission to IPART on the review of the rate peg, subject to a 2%. So it's the officer's recommendation be adopted. That's fine. But you're right. That other one shouldn't be there. That's right. Been a long meeting. Okay, I declare that carried. The next item is formulating a 2% efficiency gain.
Yes, thank you, Mr. May. Back to the Chief Financial Officer. This is your last one, Mr. Kuzmanowski.
Thank you. This report addresses the resolution made at the June 22 Extraordinary Council meeting, where a report on the introduction of an efficiency gain of up to 2% to fund community priority projects in the 23-24 financial year be tabled to Council. The report outlines the approach that council officers will be taking in delivering and reporting on the 2% up to 2% efficiency gain. This is proposed to be delivered through expenditure reductions and seeking additional revenue streams, noting the mitigating factors that are currently impacting council's budget that we've just spoken about. It is proposed that the efficiency targets will be incorporated in the 23-24 budget and operational plan outcomes. The recommendation, we seek that council recommends to adopt the report. Thank you.
Look, this is a sobering report, and I agree with your commentary on potential across the different sections. However, when preparing the budget and the council considering it, there's no question that the CPI at that stage more than likely will be double the rate cap of 4.1, and while the efficiency gain might have been a good idea back when I suggested it, I understand the realities of life. I just want all staff to keep it in mind. Having said that, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 420 of the business paper and declare that carried. Kirkham Road, there's no introduction, but I think it highlights the challenges that confront all local government, and with what's happening, as the General Manager noted earlier, out west, it's only going to compound the issues. In relation to item 9.27, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 425 of the business paper, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and declare that carried. Curb and Gutter, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. May. And our final report this evening. Thank you, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, General Manager. Mr May, the purpose of this report is to seek Council's endorsement for the repeal of the contribution to footpath and curb and gutter policy. In accordance with the Local Government Act, Council can seek contributions from residents and businesses towards the construction of curb and gutter and footpaths within the road reserve. Despite the policy being in alignment with the Local Government Act, it is one which is received very poorly by residents and is the subject of many queries, complaints and general frustrations. We have heard those frustrations and we are recommending that Council endorse the repeal of this policy. Doing so would bring the funding model for these assets into line with all other types of civil infrastructure. It is also in keeping with trends that we see across New South Wales with councils choosing to not collect these contributions. And we understand that, the repeal of this policy will be well received by the community, and so it is our recommendation that Council endorses as such.
In relation to this matter, when you go walking around the Shire in the bigger townships, you quite often have footpath and then grass, which recently has been mud, for a couple of properties. Where there's a new property development, you'll have footpath again. The best example I can give is at the corner of the Mossvale Road and Frusen Street on the western side, where there's a new block of units and no footpath. Is that what you're suggesting? We don't get contributions for those kind of footpaths anymore?
No, so the policy is more for as part of Council's capital works program when Council looks to deliver curb and gutter projects that construct curb and gutter. Council can seek a contribution from the residents that are directly fronting that curb and gutter.
Okay. I've been meaning to ask about that development, but I'll ask enough questions. But it's an interesting one that it's a new development. It's been pretty close to finish since I've been here. And then there's just no footpath, but there's footpath either side of it. And so that doesn't affect this.
My understanding is in those situations that's entirely subject to the development approval process. As part of the conditions of consent, you can levy you can condition that they need to conduct XYZ within the road reserve as a result of the development.
Look, it's not a priority matter, it's just that when you walk around, it's amazing how many times you find a spot and there's a new development and no footpath. Some areas where there's a new development and there's no curb and gutter anywhere, which, makes sense. But anyhow, I just raised that. In relation to item 9.28, I would move the officer's recommendation as outlined on page 431 of the business paper and declare that carried. General Manager, are there any late items?
No further items, thank you, Mr May.
Thank you. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.